There's a moment in every person's life when the veil is lifted and you see everything for what it truly is. That moment for me came without warning, on an ordinary Tuesday, in the most unexpected way. I wasn't looking for anything, I swear. I didn't want to believe it could be true, but I couldn't ignore what my gut was telling me. My name is Harold, and I'm not the kind of guy who makes a scene or confronts people over baseless suspicions. In fact, I'm the guy who lets things go, who keeps his head down, who trusts without question. But lately, I've been questioning everything. It started small, like when Claire began leaving for extra shifts and meetings that seemed to go on forever. At first, I told myself it was all work-related. She's ambitious, dedicated. I'm lucky to have someone like her. But the hours didn't add up. She'd leave earlier, come back later, and when I asked her how her day went, she'd smile, but her eyes always seemed elsewhere. I'll be honest, I didn't think it through. I didn't prepare for the truth. I never thought I'd find myself doing what I did, but there I was. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, where she hardly said a word, barely touched her food, I found myself staring at her phone while she was in the bathroom. Her notifications kept lighting up, one after another, and I told myself to stop, that it wasn't my place. But then, one text caught my eye. It was from a name I didn't recognize. "Are we still on for tonight?" the message read. My heart dropped to my stomach. I told myself it was nothing. I couldn't just jump to conclusions. But the nagging feeling inside me was unbearable, and I had to know. So, I did something I promised myself I would never do. I opened the message. "Just making sure," the reply said. "I'll be at the usual spot at 8. Don't be late." My hands were shaking. The usual spot? Who was she meeting? Why didn't she tell me about this? Was I really this blind to what was happening right under my nose? I didn't wait for Claire to return from the bathroom. I grabbed my coat and left the house. I needed answers. I wasn't going to be the guy who sat in the dark anymore, blindly trusting, pretending everything was fine. I was done with that. The night was colder than I expected, but I didn't care. My mind raced as I drove through the city, trying to figure out where the usual spot could be. It didn't take me long to get a sinking feeling that I wasn't going to like what I found. Claire had always been so careful, so meticulous with everything. But she wasn't careful enough. I parked a block away and watched. The street was dimly lit, the quiet hum of distant traffic filling the silence. At exactly 8 o'clock, I saw her walk into the small cafe at the corner. I almost turned around, telling myself that it was just work, just another one of her meetings. But then I saw him. The man. He stood up as Claire entered, and they exchanged a smile, one that made my stomach churn. Not a "hey, how was your day" kind of smile. It was something else. Something familiar. Something intimate. I watched as they sat at a table in the corner. I could barely hear their conversation through the window, but the way they leaned in close, the soft laughter between them, it was all too much. Claire wasn't just working late. She wasn't just having meetings. She was seeing someone. I felt like a fool. A part of me wanted to rush inside and confront them both, but another part of me, maybe the smarter part, told me to wait, to gather my thoughts, to not do anything rash. I had to be sure. So, I stayed there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, watching as she laughed with a man I didn't recognize. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I realized I didn't know her at all. I couldn't even tell you what was worse, the betrayal or the realization that I had been so blind. It wasn't until they got up to leave that I finally understood the full weight of what was happening. Claire kissed him, right there, in the middle of the street. I wanted to scream, to run to them and demand answers. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, paralyzed. She kissed him like she'd kissed me countless times before. Only this time, it wasn't me. It wasn't me at all. I didn't follow them. I didn't want to see any more. I turned around and drove home. But even as I parked in my driveway, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't know what to do next. What could I possibly say? I walked into the house, the same house where we'd shared so many memories, so many laughs. But tonight, it felt like a stranger's home. She didn't know I knew. She didn't know I had seen everything. But I would make sure she did. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. The drive home felt like a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. But my mind was racing, replaying that kiss over and over again. It wasn't just a friendly peck. It wasn't a "thank you for the great day" kind of kiss. It was the kind of kiss you give someone you're in love with. I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most. It was the fact that I had been so blind. I had trusted her. I had trusted Claire, and now it felt like she had shattered everything in an instant. I parked in the driveway, staring at the house. The same house where we built our life together, where we talked about dreams and plans for the future. It felt like it belonged to someone else now. I could hear the front door open as she walked in, calling out to me like nothing had changed. "Harold," she said, her voice sweet, calm, as if everything was just normal. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything to her right then. How could I? What was there to say? I wanted to confront her, to shout at her, to make her feel the same pain I was feeling, but instead, I stayed silent. I turned on the lights and headed into the kitchen, trying to collect my thoughts. Claire came in shortly after, her heels clicking against the floor as she walked into the room. She didn't even notice the tension in the air. She just smiled and kissed me on the cheek, asking if I had eaten yet. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when I knew the truth. I barely even heard her as she continued to talk, telling me about her day and how tired she was. I nodded along, forcing a smile. But inside, I was seething. I wasn't going to confront her right then. No, I needed time. Time to think, time to plan. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I couldn't. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kiss. I saw Claire with that man, smiling, touching him like she used to touch me. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I kept asking myself, why? Why would she do this to me? I had done everything for her. Everything. But somehow, I wasn't enough. The next day, I did something I never thought I would. I took the day off work. I wasn't going to just sit there and let her think everything was fine. I wasn't going to act like nothing had happened. I had to make her face the reality of what she had done. So I followed her. I knew she had a meeting that afternoon, and this time, I wasn't going to sit idly by. I drove through the city, keeping my distance, watching her as she left the house. She didn't even look back. The indifference on her face made my blood boil. I trailed her to a quiet part of town, to a fancy restaurant, one I had never seen her go to before. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked across the street and watched her walk inside. I waited. My mind was racing, wondering if she was meeting him again. Would she kiss him again? Would she act like I didn't even exist? I didn't know, but I wasn't leaving until I had all the answers. About 20 minutes later, I saw a familiar face walking toward the entrance. It was him, the man. I didn't recognize him at first, but now it was clear. He was the same guy from last night, the one she had kissed. I watched them exchange a few words, and once again, that sick feeling settled in my stomach. They were close, so close, like they didn't care who was watching. The way he looked at her, the way she responded, it was like they were already a couple. My wife, my Claire, with him. They entered the restaurant together, laughing, chatting like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. But I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't just going to walk away and pretend everything was fine. No, this was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to keep quiet anymore. As I sat there, watching them through the restaurant window, I finally understood. I wasn't the man she wanted anymore. I wasn't enough. She had found someone else. But that didn't mean I had to let her get away with it. I stayed parked for a few more minutes, trying to calm my shaking hands. I had to think this through. I had to plan my next move carefully. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to confront her right there. No, I wanted this to hurt. I wanted her to understand the consequences of her actions. So, I went home, and as soon as I walked through the door, I knew it was time. Time to finally face her. I couldn't shake the image of Claire and him together. The way they laughed, the way they shared those looks, those touches, it was like I didn't even exist in her world anymore. I kept thinking about that kiss, the one that shattered my heart into a million pieces. How could she do this to me? What did I miss? I had spent years with her, trusting her, loving her, and now, I was nothing more than a fool. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but something inside me told me to wait, to let her dig herself deeper into this mess. I spent the night at home, pacing back and forth in the living room. I didn't even know how to feel anymore. I was angry, hurt, betrayed, so many emotions all at once. I wanted to scream, but I knew that wouldn't help. I needed to be strategic. I needed to make sure she understood what she was doing and the impact it had on me. But above all, I needed to make sure I wasn't going to be the one left in the dust, forgotten. The next day, I did what any man in my position would do. I played the part of the loving, unsuspecting husband. When Claire came home, I asked her how her day had gone, like everything was normal. She smiled, that same smile she always gave me when she knew I wasn't going to press too hard. She told me about her meetings, her clients, and I nodded, pretending I didn't know what she was up to. It made my stomach churn, but I kept my composure. I couldn't let her see how broken I was. Not yet. She seemed to be at ease, almost too comfortable. I watched her as she moved around the house, getting ready for another evening out. She had told me she was going to meet a friend for dinner, and I didn't press her for more details. It wasn't until she left that I finally made my move. I had to know for sure. Was she seeing him again? Was this the last straw? I couldn't just wait and wonder any longer. I followed her once again, keeping a safe distance, trying not to raise any suspicion. My heart raced as I saw her pull into the same parking lot where I had seen her the night before. She was at the same restaurant, the same place where I had watched them together. But this time, I didn't want to just observe. I had a plan. I parked my car a few blocks away and walked to the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't going to let her keep lying to me. I wasn't going to sit back and let her think she could have it all. As I stood outside the restaurant, looking through the window, I saw them again. Claire and the man. They were seated at a corner table, laughing and talking like nothing had changed. It was like they had their own world, and I wasn't even a part of it. I watched as she touched his arm, smiling in a way that she hadn't smiled at me in months. The jealousy, the hurt, it all built up inside me like a tidal wave, threatening to swallow me whole. But I stayed calm. I wasn't going to lose control. Not yet. I waited for a few minutes, watching them, trying to steady my breathing. I could feel my anger rising, but I had to be patient. I had to make sure I did this right. I had to make sure she understood exactly what she had done. After what felt like an eternity, I saw her stand up. She hugged him, and this time, it was longer, more intimate. It wasn't just a goodbye hug. It was a, I can't wait to see you again hug. As she pulled away, she kissed him on the cheek, and I could feel my blood boiling. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I followed them outside, keeping my distance, making sure I wasn't noticed. I watched as they got into his car, and as they drove off, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't just let her walk away from me. I went back to my car, my hands shaking with adrenaline. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I wasn't going to pretend like everything was okay when I knew the truth. It was time to confront her. It was time for her to understand the consequences of her actions. But I wasn't going to do it the way she thought. No, I was going to play this differently. I had a plan, and it was going to hurt. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car parked outside, but Claire wasn't home yet. I waited, watching the clock tick by. When she finally walked through the door, I didn't say a word. I didn't greet her like I usually did. I just stared at her, letting the silence hang in the air. Claire looked at me, confused. Harold? What's wrong? I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures. The pictures of her and him, smiling, laughing, kissing. I watched her face go pale, her eyes widening as the reality of what she had done hit her. But I didn't stop there. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I wanted her to know how much it hurt. I followed you, I said, my voice calm, but my words cutting like a knife. I saw everything. And now, you're going to explain yourself. The shock on her face was evident. She didn't know how to respond. But I wasn't going to let her off easy. I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this one. You have a choice now, I continued. You can either tell me the truth, or we can go down a different path. Either way, I'm done being the fool. I watched as she stumbled for words, trying to come up with an excuse, trying to explain away the unexplainable. But there was no excuse. There was nothing she could say that would change the fact that she had betrayed me. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But that quickly faded. Sympathy was something I had run out of. Now, it was time for her to face the consequences. The silence between us stretched out for what felt like an eternity. Claire stood there, her hands trembling as she looked at the pictures on my phone, the weight of her actions pressing down on her like an unbearable burden. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything she had done, the lies she had told, the trust she had shattered. I didn't want to feel sorry for her. She didn't deserve my sympathy. I watched her carefully, studying her every move, trying to gauge if she was truly remorseful or just trying to save face. Her eyes darted between the pictures and my face, and I could see the panic starting to set in. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. She was searching for something, anything to say that would make it all go away, but I knew there was nothing she could say. The truth was already out in the open. "You've been lying to me for months, Claire," I said, my voice steady but laced with the anger I had been holding back for far too long. "For months, you've been meeting him behind my back. And you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth." She took a step forward, her face now a mix of guilt and desperation. "Harold, she began, but I cut her off. "No." I held up my hand, silencing her. "You don't get to make excuses. You don't get to tell me it was a mistake or that it didn't mean anything. I'm done with all of that. I'm done with the lies." Claire's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw her vulnerability. I had never seen her like this before. The woman I had loved for so long, the woman who had always been so confident, was now standing in front of me, broken. But it didn't change anything. I had reached my breaking point, and now, it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. "I don't know what to say, Harold," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen." I could feel my blood boiling as I listened to her words. Of course, she hadn't meant to hurt me. But that was the problem, wasn't it? She didn't mean to hurt me, but she did. She had torn apart everything we had built together, and now I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered heart. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated, the sarcasm thick in my voice. "How do you not mean to hurt someone when you're lying to their face? When you're kissing another man behind their back? What part of that didn't hurt me, Claire?" She stepped back, her eyes welling with tears. "I never wanted to hurt you," she sobbed. "I swear, Harold, I never meant for any of this to happen." I wasn't sure what I expected from her, but this wasn't it. I wanted her to take responsibility. I wanted her to admit that what she did was wrong, that it had consequences. But instead, I was getting a version of her that felt sorry for herself. She wasn't sorry for me. She was sorry for herself. And that only made the situation worse. I took a deep breath, trying to control my rising anger. I couldn't let her manipulate me. I couldn't let her make me feel guilty for her actions. I had to stay strong. "This isn't just about you feeling guilty, Claire," I said, my voice low and controlled. "This is about the fact that you lied to me. You betrayed me. You betrayed everything we've built together." I saw her wipe away a tear, her face a mixture of regret and shame. But I wasn't done yet. I had to make sure she understood the full scope of what she had done. "I don't know how you thought you could get away with this," I continued, my voice growing firmer. "But you've crossed a line that can't be undone." Claire took a shaky breath and nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I don't know what to say, Harold. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would get this far." I could see it now. The guilt was real, but it wasn't enough. The damage had already been done, and no amount of sorry could fix it. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, my arms crossed, watching her carefully. "You don't have to say anything, Claire. The only thing left for you to do now is decide what you're going to do next." She stared at me, her eyes searching mine, as if waiting for me to give her some kind of answer, some kind of reassurance. But I wasn't going to give her that. Not anymore. "I've made my decision," I said coldly. "I'm done, Claire. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She gasped, her face paling as if I had just stripped away the last bit of hope she had left. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her again. "No," I said, my tone final. "This isn't a conversation anymore. This is over." I could see the realization sink in as she stood there, frozen, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. She had thought that she could have it all, me and him. But now, she was left with nothing. She slowly turned away, tears streaming down her face, and walked out of the room without saying another word. I could hear her footsteps retreating down the hall, and I knew this was it. This was the moment everything changed. I had lost her, but in that moment, I realized something else. I had also gained something myself. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the man who would silently tolerate betrayal. I was stronger now, stronger than I had ever been before. The silence in the house felt suffocating, but it was the first time in months that I actually felt free. The next few days felt like a blur. After Claire left, I was left in a strange, suffocating silence, as if the house itself had become a stranger to me. It was like everything I thought I knew had been stripped away, leaving me with nothing but an overwhelming emptiness. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind replayed the events over and over, like a broken record I couldn't turn off. I had asked for the truth, and I had gotten it. But now what? What was I supposed to do with the pieces of my life that were scattered around me? Claire tried to contact me. Texts, calls, messages left on the answering machine. But I ignored them all. I didn't need to hear her voice. Not yet. She had taken everything I had trusted and twisted it into something unrecognizable. What could she possibly say to make things better? She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences of those choices. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was a hole in my chest where she used to be, and no amount of anger or hurt seemed to fill it. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, staring blankly at the wall, the doorbell rang. At first, I didn't want to answer it. I wasn't in the mood to see anyone, let alone Claire. But the curiosity got the best of me. Maybe it was the need for closure, or maybe it was just the weight of loneliness that made me walk to the door and open it. To my surprise, it wasn't Claire standing there. It was a man I didn't recognize, holding a small envelope in his hand. He was tall, clean-cut, and wore a dark suit that looked a little too formal for a casual visit. His expression was serious, almost sympathetic, as if he knew exactly what had been going on but couldn't say it aloud. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir," he said quietly, his voice steady but tinged with an air of formality. "But I've been instructed to deliver this to you." I glanced at the envelope. It was plain, no markings or return address. It could have been anything, but I knew, deep down, what it was. I took it from his hands without a word, and before I could even ask what it was about, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the quiet night. I closed the door behind me and stood there, staring at the envelope in my hands. Something told me that whatever was inside would change everything. I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling a strange sense of dread mixed with curiosity. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, written in neat, precise handwriting. As I read the words, my heart seemed to stop. The letter was from Claire's lawyer. "Dear Mr. Harold Daniels," it began. "We regret to inform you that your wife, Claire Daniels, has initiated divorce proceedings. Please be advised that you will be contacted in the coming days to arrange for further proceedings." I couldn't believe it. It hit me like a freight train. Divorce. She was already taking the next step, making the decision for both of us. There it was, in black and white, proof that she had already moved on. The anger that had been boiling inside me for days intensified, but now there was something else. A cold, numb realization. She had already decided what she wanted. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. But then, as I continued to read the letter, something caught my eye. A second page was hidden beneath the first. I flipped it over and read the words that were scrawled in a hurried hand. They weren't as formal as the rest of the letter. It was almost like a note. "Harold," it read, "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I made a mistake, and now I'm paying for it. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I don't think we can go back to what we had. Please understand. This is for the best. I hope one day you can forgive me." The words stung more than I expected. She was still apologizing, still trying to find a way to justify what she'd done. But there was something in those words that twisted something deep inside me. She had made the decision for both of us, yet she was still holding on to the idea that I could forgive her, that I could just let it all go. I balled the letter up and threw it across the room. I couldn't stand it. The audacity, the coldness. After everything, after the lies, after the betrayal, she still thought she could apologize her way out of it. It was too late for apologies. Too late for forgiveness. I stood up, pacing the room as the weight of it all hit me. This wasn't just about her. This was about me, too. About what I had allowed myself to become. A man who let someone walk all over him. Who trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I wasn't that man anymore. I had to stop pretending that everything would be okay. I had to stop being the fool. The house felt suffocating again, the silence louder than ever. I had always been the quiet one, the one who never spoke up, who kept everything inside. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I wasn't going to let her tear apart everything we had and then expect me to just move on like it didn't matter. I didn't know what came next, but one thing was certain. Claire had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I woke up the next morning with a feeling of heaviness in my chest, a weight that seemed to press down on me, as if the world itself was conspiring against me. The divorce papers were only the beginning of what felt like a never-ending spiral into an abyss. It had only been a few days, but it already felt like a lifetime. My mind kept replaying the moment I had received the letter, Claire's words, her apologies, and her attempt to explain her actions. I had thrown the letter across the room, but the truth of it still lingered in the air like a toxic cloud. It wasn't just that Claire was leaving. It wasn't just the betrayal that was eating away at me, or the fact that she had moved on to someone else. No, what hurt the most was that I had let it all happen. I had stood by, too passive, too trusting. I had ignored the signs, convinced myself that everything would work out, that she would come back to me. But that wasn't going to happen. She had already made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. The house was silent. Claire's absence was deafening. Every room seemed to echo with the ghosts of our past, our laughter, our conversations, the plans we had made for the future. It all felt so distant now, like a dream I had once had that had slowly faded away. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep wallowing in self-pity, letting the pain consume me. It was time to take control, to stop being the victim in this story. But where did I even begin? How could I rebuild my life when it felt like everything I had ever known was falling apart? I decided to start small, to make one change that would signify my break from the past. I went to the garage and grabbed the old box of things that Claire and I had accumulated over the years. Photos, souvenirs from trips, random trinkets that held sentimental value. At first, it felt like I was just holding on to memories, but the more I looked at the box, the more I realized that those memories were nothing more than chains keeping me tied to the past. I didn't need them anymore. They were a reminder of the person I used to be, a person who was willing to forgive, to forget. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I spent hours going through the box, sorting through the items, one by one. With every photo I threw away, with every memento I discarded, I felt a little lighter. It was as if I was shedding a skin that no longer fit. The weight of the past was lifting, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Some of those things held meaning. They were part of the life we had shared. But in the end, I knew it was necessary. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was never coming back. By the time I finished, the garage was empty, and I felt a strange sense of relief. The space was clear, free of the clutter that had filled it for years. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I could breathe again. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the empty walls. The house was eerily quiet, but I found comfort in the silence. It was my silence now. There were no more whispers of doubt, no more questions, no more wondering what she was doing or who she was with. Claire had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I pulled out my phone and opened a new contact. I typed in the name of a lawyer, someone I had researched a few days ago. It felt surreal, making this call, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't sit around anymore, waiting for the pieces to fall into place. I had to take control of my future. I had to move forward, even if it meant leaving everything behind. The phone rang, and when the receptionist answered, I could feel the anxiety bubbling up inside me. But I didn't let it show. I made the appointment. The first step was done. I was taking action. I was finally doing something for myself. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and phone calls. Each step I took felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was in control. But as much as I focused on the logistics of moving forward, the emotional toll was still there. Claire hadn't contacted me again after that letter. Part of me wanted to hear from her, wanted her to try to explain herself, to apologize again, to make me believe that there was some way we could fix this. But another part of me, maybe the stronger part, the part that had begun to rise up from the wreckage, knew that I couldn't go back. There was no going back. I was beginning to realize that the person I had been, the man who had blindly trusted, who had put others before himself, no longer existed. He was gone. The new version of me was someone who would stand up for himself, who would no longer allow himself to be a doormat. And as the days turned into weeks, I found a strange peace in that. The anger still simmered below the surface, but it wasn't consuming me. It was motivating me. Every decision I made, every step I took, was a step toward reclaiming my life. I was no longer the man who had been hurt. I was the man who was healing. And then, one day, I received another letter. This one wasn't from a lawyer, though. It was from Claire. The moment I saw her handwriting, my heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected to hear from her again. Not after everything. But I opened it anyway, my hands trembling slightly. Harold, the letter began. I know you're probably angry with me, and I can't blame you. I've hurt you more than I can explain. I never meant for any of this to happen, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't make up for what I've done, but I want you to know that I've been trying to understand where I went wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I regret everything. I read the words over and over, but they felt hollow. The same words. The same excuses. It was too late for apologies. She had made her choice long ago, and now it was my turn to make mine. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I wasn't the man I was before. I was stronger, and I wasn't going to let her break me again. A few weeks had passed since I had received Claire's letter, and life, in its own cruel way, had begun to return to some semblance of normal. At least, that's what I tried to tell myself. The days blurred together, filled with the mundane rituals that had once seemed so insignificant. Going to work, grabbing takeout for dinner, watching the same old shows on TV as if the world hadn't turned upside down just a short time ago. But in the quiet moments, when my mind was free to wander, the pain still lingered. It wasn't as raw as it had been in those first days after Claire left, but it was still there, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. I hadn't heard from Claire since that last letter. Part of me wanted her to reach out, to apologize again, to beg me for forgiveness. I didn't know why I wanted that. Maybe it was the part of me that still loved her, the part that was still holding on to the idea of the life we had shared. But that part of me was slowly fading. With every passing day, I felt myself growing further away from the man I used to be, and it wasn't just about her. It was about me, about taking back the pieces of myself that I had lost along the way. I had made progress, or at least I told myself I had. I was getting my life together. I had started going to the gym again, eating better, focusing on the things that mattered. I even reconnected with old friends, people I had neglected while I was wrapped up in my marriage. They didn't ask about Claire, and I didn't bring her up. It was easier that way. The less I thought about her, the less it hurt. But no matter how much I tried to move on, the memory of her never really left me. The thought of her with him, whoever he was, still haunted me. I hadn't allowed myself to think about him in detail. His face, his name, his place in her life, they were all things I didn't want to know. I had made a promise to myself not to go down that path. What difference would it make? She had already made her decision, and I had made mine. I couldn't afford to be consumed by jealousy or bitterness. But that didn't stop the question from nagging at the back of my mind. Who was he? What made him different from me? Was he everything I wasn't? It was one of those questions I didn't have an answer for, and deep down, I knew I didn't need to. Because knowing the answer wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring back what we had, and it definitely wouldn't fix what had been broken. One evening, about a month after everything had settled, I received a text message. The notification popped up on my phone while I was watching TV, and for a moment, I thought it was one of the usual spam messages or maybe a reminder for an appointment I had forgotten. But when I looked at the name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was Claire. I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring before my eyes. My finger hovered over the screen, unsure whether I should open it. My mind raced, torn between the desire to know what she had to say and the overwhelming need to protect myself from whatever it was she might be asking for. Finally, I opened the message. Harold, it read, I need to talk. Can we meet? Please. I sat there for a long time, staring at the words. Part of me wanted to delete the message, block her number, and pretend it was just another bad dream. But another part of me, maybe the part that still felt something for her, wondered what she could possibly want now. Why after all this time? Why now? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I spent the next several hours battling with myself. I could ignore her, continue to live my life without ever hearing from her again, or I could meet with her and finally get some kind of closure, if that was even possible. I wasn't sure I was ready for that, but I knew I couldn't live in limbo forever. The next morning, I found myself typing a response. Where and when? I sent it, before I could overthink it. It wasn't a message filled with hope or anger. It was neutral, distant, almost detached. But as soon as I hit send, I felt a strange weight lift from my shoulders. It was like I was taking control of something again, like I wasn't letting her dictate how I felt. She responded almost immediately, suggesting a cafe in town. It was a place we used to go to on lazy Sundays, a place that held too many memories for comfort. But it didn't matter. I wasn't the same person I had been when we last walked in there together. That afternoon, I drove to the cafe, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as the familiar streets passed by. It felt almost surreal, like I was walking into a memory I had buried deep inside, only to find it resurrected. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw her sitting at a corner table, staring out the window, her posture stiff, like she was waiting for something or someone. When she saw me, her face softened, and for a split second, it almost felt like we were back in the good old days, when we would laugh over coffee and talk about everything and nothing. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, there was nothing between us but silence and unanswered questions. I walked over to the table, and as I sat down, Claire looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was she nervous? Was she sorry? Or was she just looking for a way back into my life? I couldn't tell, and part of me didn't care to know. The moment we shared was already over. Harold, she began, her voice quieter than I remembered. I'm so sorry for everything. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I know it's too late, but I still wanted to apologize. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant to hurt you. Her words were familiar. They were the same ones she had written in her letter, the same ones she had said when I confronted her. I wasn't sure if I believed them anymore. The sincerity was gone, replaced by a hollow echo of what had once been. I didn't want to listen to the same apology, the same excuses. I took a deep breath, pushing the anger and resentment down. Claire, I said, my voice calm but firm. You've apologized. But the truth is, you've already made your decision. I've made mine too. And I'm done. You can't come back from this. We can't go back to what we were. And I'm not going to pretend like I can just forget everything. I saw the look in her eyes, the realization that I had moved on, that I had let go, that I wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. It stung her, I could tell, but it was also liberating for me. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. I stood up, leaving the money for the coffee on the table, and walked out of the cafe. This time, I wasn't looking back. Walking out of that cafe, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. It wasn't that everything was perfect, but in that moment, I realized something profound. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't the man who would cling to a love that had betrayed him. I wasn't the man who would let his past define his future. I was stronger than I had ever been. As I drove home, the familiar streets no longer felt like a reminder of what I had lost. Instead, they felt like a canvas, one that I could finally paint with my own story. I was no longer just existing, waiting for things to get better. I was actively creating a life that was mine. And that felt powerful. Over the next few months, I threw myself into rebuilding. Not just my home, but my life. I started picking up hobbies I had abandoned, like painting and writing. I joined a local hiking group and rediscovered the joy of being outside, of feeling the world around me instead of just letting it pass me by. I reconnected with old friends, some I hadn't seen in years, and we laughed over stories of the past, but also shared our dreams for the future. It was strange at first, being around people who didn't know the old me, the one who had been so wrapped up in Claire, so willing to accept anything. But it was freeing, too. I realized that I didn't need anyone else's validation to know that I was worthy. I was enough, just as I was. And then there was Ava. She was a woman I met through my hiking group, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark. It wasn't the kind of explosive passion I had felt with Claire. It was quieter, more genuine. Ava didn't try to fix me, and she didn't expect me to be someone I wasn't. She just accepted me as I was, broken, but healing. Slowly, we began to spend more time together, sharing quiet dinners, long walks, and conversations that didn't feel rushed. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other at our own pace. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the city, the last rays of the sun casting a warm glow over everything, Ava turned to me. Harold, she said softly, I'm glad I met you. I know it's not easy, but I can see how far you've come. I smiled, looking out at the horizon. For once, I felt at peace. I never thought I'd be here, I said, my voice quiet but certain. I didn't think I could get through it. But I did, and I'm better for it. She reached for my hand, and I didn't hesitate. It felt right. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of getting hurt again because I knew that even if life threw me another curveball, I was stronger. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I wasn't defined by Claire, by the betrayal, by the hurt. I was defined by who I had become, a man who had learned to heal, to grow, and to love again, in his own time, in his own way. The next chapter of my life wasn't going to be about looking back at what I had lost. It was going to be about moving forward, about finding new joys, new connections, and new opportunities. It was going to be about me, and that was enough. As I held Ava's hand, I realized that sometimes letting go of the past was the only way to make room for the future. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited for whatever that future held. Whatever came next, I was ready.